It was a sticky summer afternoon in Arizona, the kind that left a film of sweat on your skin and made the air hum with cicadas. I had just returned from my usual morning walk, the kind that felt more like a battle with the heat than a stroll, when my son barged in without knocking. Ethan, tall, broad-shouldered, the lines of his face deepened by worry or perhaps resentment, stood there, staring at me like I was a criminal. "You're spending our inheritance," he shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, frozen, the screen door half open behind me. Dust swirling in the harsh desert breeze. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. My mind raced, trying to find a foothold in his accusation. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaky. I was 72, a widow of 7 years. After Dad died, I sold the house we'd shared for 35 years and downsized to a small condo on the outskirts of Tucson. It was enough, or at least I thought it was enough. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Mom?" Ethan's voice was tight, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "All those weekend trips to Sedona, the spa days, the new camera you bought. You're burning through money like there's no tomorrow." Feeling a sudden surge of indignation. I had worked hard my whole life, teaching elementary school, tutoring after hours, cooking dinners from scratch to save a few dollars here and there. I'd sacrificed for him soccer camp, new shoes when mine were full of holes, every opportunity I could afford. "Ethan, I'm living my life," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I've spent decades putting everyone else first. I'm not spending your inheritance. I'm spending my money on me." His face contorted, his eyes clouding with something between hurt and fury. "That's supposed to be my future. My kids' college." "You're being selfish, Mom. You're not thinking about anyone else but yourself." I looked at him, this grown man who had once been my little boy, who had clutched my hand as we crossed the street and run to me after scrapes on the playground. I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was being selfish. But then, in the silence that followed his words, I realized this was the first time in my life that I dared to put myself first. And it wasn't wrong to want to feel alive again, to taste the air in foreign lands, to stand before the Eiffel Tower, to drink wine in a Tuscan vineyard. "Ethan," I began softly, but with a firmness he hadn't heard from me in years. "I love you, and I love your family, but this is my life to live. I'm not going to sit at home waiting to die so you can have more when I'm gone. Earn this, and I'm going to take it." He shook his head, disbelieving. "So you're just going to spend everything?" I replied, "But I'm going to live my life while I still can." "I'm not going to apologize for that." Ethan's shoulders slumped. His anger deflated into a quiet, sad disbelief. "I can't believe you'd do this to us," he muttered, then turned and walked out the door, leaving a trail of dust and hurt feelings behind him. I watched him go, the sun glaring down on the quiet street. A dog barked in the distance. I felt the weight of the conversation settle on my chest like a stone. But then I thought about the list I'd made, the places I'd always wanted to see, the experiences I'd dreamed of. I thought about the way my heart had fluttered when I'd booked that first flight. This was my time, and I wasn't going to waste it feeling guilty inside. I took a deep breath and started packing my suitcase. The air in my condo felt heavy, as if it too carried the weight of Ethan's accusations. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting sharp lines across the beige carpet and illuminating the cardboard boxes. I'd never fully unpacked since moving in. I stood in my bedroom, suitcase open on the bed, the zipper stuck in one spot, a reminder that even simple things could be stubborn. I wrestled with it for a moment before giving it a firm tug. The zipper gave way with a satisfying pop, and I felt a small sense of victory. Clothes lay folded, neatly on the dresser. I picked up a well-worn denim jacket, the same one I'd worn to countless school plays and parent-teacher conferences, and felt a pang of nostalgia. I'd always been the mother, the teacher, the caretaker. We who Was I, now that the demands of everyone else had faded? The thought both frightened and excited me. I reached for a stack of travel guides I'd borrowed from the library. Paris, Barcelona, Kyoto, Santorini. Their pages were dog-eared, filled with handwritten notes. Visit the Louvre on a weekday. To avoid crowds, eat at small local cafes instead of tourist traps. Learn a few polite phrases in the local language. In the corner of the room sat a new pair of hiking boots, stiff yet to be broken in. I remembered how Ethan had rolled his eyes when I bought them. "You're not going to be climbing mountains, Mom," he'd said. But he didn't understand that even city sidewalks could be mountains when your legs had grown used to the same old paths as I packed. Memories tugged at me. The first time I'd changed Ethan's diaper. The smell of cookies baking for his. Class parties, the way his small hand had felt in mine, trusting and warm. How had we come to this? 2 accusations of theft, of betrayal. I tried to brush away the guilt that kept creeping in. The voice that whispered, maybe he's right. Maybe you're being selfish. But then I remembered how small and boxed in I'd felt these last few years. How every decision had been measured. Against what Ethan might think, what others might say. Now, as I rolled my shirts and tucked them into the suitcase, I felt a flicker of defiance and freedom. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find my neighbor Grace standing there with a curious smile. She was a retired nurse, widowed like me, her silver hair pinned back neatly. She peered at the open suitcase. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "Everywhere," I replied, grinning despite myself. She laughed softly. "Good for you, Marjorie. About time someone did." Her words felt like a benediction. "You think I'm being selfish?" I asked, surprising myself with a question. Grace tilted her head thoughtfully. "Selfish? No. Brave? Maybe. It takes courage to claim your own life after giving so much of it away." I swallowed, grateful for her kindness. "Thank you, Grace." She patted my arm. "Take pictures. Send me a postcard. And don't forget to dance in the rain if it comes." I promised her I would, even if I didn't know exactly how to do that yet. After she left, I zipped the suitcase shut. I placed it by the door, my passport peeking out of my travel bag. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Ethan. Just 2 words, "Call me." I stared at it for a moment, my heart twisting. Then I turned the phone face down. It would be time to talk later. For now, I needed to take that first step for me. Outside, the desert sky was streaked with orange and pink, the heat of the day beginning to fade. I picked up the suitcase and carried it to the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow, I'd board a plane. Tomorrow, I'd start my journey. Tonight, I'd let myself dream. The hum of the airport was both exhilarating and intimidating. Tucson International was small compared to the behemoths I'd seen on TV. But it buzzed with anticipation all the same, families shuffling through lines, solo travelers clutching passports, the occasional backpacker with a weary smile. I stood in line at the check-in counter, my heart a mix of nerves and excitement. Next, the attendant called, and I stepped forward, rolling my battered suitcase along the scuffed linoleum floor. "Bonjour," I said, testing the French, greeting I'd practiced in front of the bathroom mirror the night before. My voice wavered a little. The young woman behind the counter smiled politely, though her name tag read Jessica. Hardly a Parisian name. "Passport, please," she said, her voice crisp but friendly. I handed it over, clutching the strap of my purse for reassurance. As she typed my details into her computer, I felt a wave of doubt. Was I too old for this? What if I couldn't find my way around? What if I forgot something important? Or worse, lost something valuable? "You're all set, ma'am," Jessica said, breaking my spiral of worries. "Gate 14. Boarding in an hour." "Thank you," I murmured, tucking the passport back into my bag. I wandered through the terminal, trying to quiet my mind. The smell of cinnamon rolls from a nearby kiosk was comforting, but I resisted the temptation to indulge. I'd promised myself I'd try new things, not the same old treats. Instead, I bought a small bottle of water and a granola bar, tucking them into my carry-on dot. At the gate, I found a seat by the window. Outside, the tarmac stretched beneath the blazing sun, and planes taxied like restless creatures, eager to be airborne. I watched a family of 4, a couple with 2 small kids, settle into seats across from me. The parents wore tired expressions, but their children were all energy, squirming and giggling as they played with their stuffed animals. I envied them, not just for the energy, but for the simplicity of their dreams. For them, adventure meant coloring books and cartoons. For me, it meant reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under years of responsibility. I thought of Ethan again, his face tense, his voice full of accusation. "You're spending our inheritance." The word still stung. But as I watched a jet lift off into the sky, I felt a fierce determination settle in my chest. This was my money. Yes, but more than that, it was my time. I'd given so much of myself to others. Now I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower glow at night. I wanted to sip espresso at a sidewalk cafe and watch the world go by. Boarding now for flight 312 to Paris. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker, and my stomach flipped. I stood, gripping my boarding pass like a lifeline. As I shuffled into the line, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was the mother from earlier, her eyes warm and understanding. "First time to Paris?" she asked kindly. "Yes," I admitted. "First time anywhere, really?" She smiled. "It's magical. You'll love it. Just remember to trust yourself." Her words settled like a bomb over my nerves. "Thank you," I whispered. As the line began to move, stepping onto the plane, I found my seat near the window and buckled in. The hum of engines grew louder. The overhead bins clicked shut, and a sense of finality filled the cabin. As the plane began to taxi, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. The desert landscape blurred, and soon we were rising higher and higher until the world below was no more than a patchwork of roads and rooftops. I closed my eyes, letting the vibration of the plane calm me. In that moment, I felt the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility, and with every mile, I left the guilt, the expectations, and the doubts a little further behind. The plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport just after sunrise. The sky was a pale, sleepy gray, and the tarmac glistened with a thin film of morning dew. I peered out the window as we taxied toward the terminal, my heart hammering in. Anticipation? I was here. Paris. As the plane door opened, a burst of cool air swept into the cabin, carrying with it a faint tank of jet fuel and damp earth. I stepped off the plane, the weight of my backpack pressing into my shoulders. The terminal bustled with travelers speaking a dozen different languages. French, English, German, Spanish, all of it blending into a hum of excitement and confusion. I followed the signs for baggage claim, clutching my passport and ticket like a lifeline. Every sign felt like a puzzle. Sortie meant exit. Baggage meant baggage. But some of the other words might as well have been hieroglyphs. I reminded myself to breathe. After a few anxious minutes, spotted my suitcase. The same battered one I'd packed in Tucson, circling on the conveyor belt like a loyal friend. I grabbed it, relieved, and made my way toward customs. A stern-looking officer glanced at my passport, asked me a few questions I barely understood, then waved me through with a nod. And then, suddenly, I was standing in the arrivals hall of one of the busiest airports in the world. The realization hitting me in waves. I had made it. I'd booked a small hotel near Montmartre, a place with ivy climbing its facade and wrought iron, balconies that overlooked the winding streets. The taxi line was long, but the driver I ended up with was kind. Even if his English was halting and my French was, at best, a patchwork of phrases from library books. "Montmartre," he confirmed, lifting my suitcase with ease. "Yes," I replied, and we set off. The ride into the city was surreal. As the taxi merged onto the peripheric, I watched the skyline emerge like a dream. Rows of Haussmann buildings, Their limestone facades, bathed in the soft glow of morning light, lined the streets. Cafes were already opening, their tables neatly arranged, the smell of fresh bread drifting in through the open window. My mind wandered to Ethan again. What would he think if he saw me now, jet-lagged and exhilarated, on the cusp of an adventure I'd never thought possible? Would he understand that this wasn't about the money, but about the life I'd never let myself live? The taxi turned off the main road and climbed a steep hill. Cobblestone streets appeared, lined with small shops selling pastries and paintings. A man in a beret, an actual beret, carried a basket of fresh baguettes down the street. And I couldn't help but smile. Here the driver said, stopping in front of a pale blue building with flower boxes on every window. A brass sign read, Hotel du Jardin. I paid him, thanked him in my broken French, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. My legs felt shaky, not just from the long flight, but from the sheer reality of it all. I was here alone, in the city I'd only ever dreamed of. The lobby was small but inviting, with a worn Persian rug and a friendly desk clerk named Camille, who greeted me with a cheerful bonjour. Bonjour, I managed, though my accent made her smile gently. She handed me a brass key attached to a heavy fob. Room 24. Breakfast is from 7 to 10. Enjoy your stay. The elevator creaked as it carried me to the second floor. My room overlooked a quiet courtyard where a stray cat curled in a sunny patch of grass. The bedspread was floral, the wallpaper a faded cream with small blue flowers, nothing fancy, but cozy. I set down my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. The adrenaline that had carried me from Tucson to Paris now gave way to a trembling wariness. Tears pricked at my eyes unbidden. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I heard the sound of children laughing in the street below, the clink of dishes in a cafe, the music of a violin drifting through an open window. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of Paris wash over me. This was my life now. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had chosen it. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of my hotel room, a soft golden glow that painted the faded wallpaper in warm hues. The sounds of Paris, distant church bells, the murmur of morning traffic, a street musician's gentle accordion drifted through the window. I lay there for a moment, savoring the unfamiliar rhythm of a city waking up around me. Back home in Arizona, mornings had a different kind of beauty. The quiet hum of cicadas, the warm smell of desert sage. Here, everything felt alive, vibrant, infused with a kind of magic I'd only read about. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and felt the cool wooden floor beneath my feet. My suitcase sat in the corner, half unpacked, as though uncertain whether I truly intended to stay. I rummaged through it and chose a loose-fitting blouse and a pair of comfortable jeans. I'd promised myself I wouldn't try to blend in. I was here to live, not to hide. Downstairs, the small breakfast room smelled of fresh coffee and buttery croissants. A woman with a kind smile offered me a plate of pastries, a glass of orange juice, and a steaming café au lait. I took my tray to a small table by the window and watched the street below, shopkeepers opening their shutters. A young couple walking. Hand in hand, a delivery man unloading boxes. A man at the next table glanced over and smiled. He was older, with a gray beard and warm brown eyes, a leather-bound notebook open in front of him. "American?" he asked, his accent gentle, his tone curious rather than intrusive. "Yes," I admitted, returning his smile. "Just arrived yesterday." "Welcome," he said. "Paris can be overwhelming at first. Where are you from?" "Tucson, Arizona," I replied, feeling a pang of homesickness. "It's very different." He chuckled. "Ah, the desert. I've never been, but I imagine it's beautiful." "I'm Francois," he said, extending a hand. "Writer. Mostly travel essays these days." "Marjorie," I replied, shaking his hand. "Retired teacher." His eyes crinkled. "Ah, a woman of stories. Then, what brings you to Paris?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. But something about his kind eyes made me open up. Son accused me of spending his inheritance, I said, surprising myself with the bluntness. So I decided to spend it on myself. Spent my whole life putting everyone else first. Now it's my turn. Francois nodded, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes we must choose ourselves, he said. It's not selfish, Marjorie, it's living. His words settled into my chest, warm and comforting. Have you been here long? I asked, eager to shift the focus. 20 years, he said with a soft laugh. I came for a month and never left. We chatted for a while longer, sharing small stories of our lives, his travels through Asia. My years in the classroom, the hobbies we'd neglected for too long. When I finally stood to leave, he smiled. Enjoy your day, Marjorie, he said. And if you need advice on where to go, just ask. Thank you, I replied, feeling lighter than I had since I'd left home. Outside the streets of Montmartre were alive with artists setting up easels, tourists snapping photos, and locals greeting each other with kisses on both cheeks. I wandered up a narrow street lined with boulangeries and flower stalls. Breathing in the scent of lavender and fresh bread, I paused at a small shop window displaying watercolors of the Eiffel Tower and the Seine, one painting a simple depiction of a woman in a red dress walking alone under a canopy of plane trees caught my eye. It felt like a promise of freedom, of discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten. I went inside and bought it. My first souvenir of this new chapter. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, a quiet thrill that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The sun had reached its peak, casting sharp shadows along the cobblestone streets of Montmartre. I wandered aimlessly, letting the rhythm of the neighborhood guide my steps. Painters set up their easels in place, du tertre, their brushes dancing across canvases with a confidence I envied. Tourists clustered around them, pointing and nodding, snapping photos. I felt oddly at home in the chaos. There was an energy here, a defiant bohemian spirit that seemed to laugh at the idea of growing old quietly. My stomach rumbled, reminding me that breakfast had been hours ago. I followed the scent of baking bread and sizzling garlic to a small bistro tucked in a corner between a patisserie and a florist. Its outdoor tables were adorned with checkered tablecloths, and a few patrons lingered over glasses of wine and small plates of cheese. I hesitated at the threshold, suddenly self-conscious. What was I doing here? A 72-year-old woman from Tucson, dining alone in Paris. But then I remembered Francois's words at breakfast. It's not selfish, Marjorie. It's living. I chose a table near the edge of the sidewalk and sat down. The waiter approached, young, with tousled hair and a smile that made me feel like I belonged. Bonjour, madame. Ni? Table pour un? He asked. Yes, just me, I replied, a little embarrassed by my accent. He handed me a menu and I scanned it, my mind fuzzy with unfamiliar dishes. I settled on a croque monsieur and a small salad. Along with a glass of rose, a quiet rebellion against the voice in my head that told me to play it safe. As I waited for my food, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd carried since Tucson. Its pages were mostly blank, but now felt like the right time to fill them. I wrote, Ethan, if you could see me now, you'd probably still be angry, but I hope someday you'll understand. I'm not spending your inheritance. I'm spending my life. I paused, pen hovering above the page. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. The waiter returned with my lunch, setting it down with a flourish. The sandwich was golden brown, the cheese bubbling and fragrant. I took a bite, and the flavors exploded on my tongue. Creamy, salty, comforting, as I ate. I watched the world around me. A man played guitar on the corner, his music weaving through the air like a story. A young woman hurried by, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers. A couple argued in rapid French, their gestures animated but somehow tender. I felt both an outsider and a part of it all. For so many years, my days had been measured in routines, lesson plans, grocery lists, Ethan's soccer practices. Here, time stretched and breathed, inviting me to savor each moment. When I finished my meal, I lingered over the last sip of wine, letting it warm my chest. The waiter brought the bill with a kind smile, and I paid in euros, marveling at how quickly I'd grown accustomed to the foreign currency as I stood to leave. I noticed a small shop across the street selling postcards. I crossed over and stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling. Rows of cards lined the walls, images of the Eiffel Tower at sunset, the Seine at dawn. Flower markets bursting with color. I chose one with a painting of Montmartre's rooftops. The Saker Sea rising above them like a promise. I bought a pen from the counter and sat on a bench outside to write. "Dear Ethan," I began, "I know you're angry. I hope one day you'll see that I needed this. I needed to remember who I am. Not just your mother, but a woman who still has dreams. Paris is beautiful. I wish you could see it with me. Love, Mom, Dad." I didn't know if I'd send it, but writing it made me feel lighter. The afternoon sun slanted across the street, painting everything in gold. I stood, slipping the postcard into my bag. I had miles to go, I reminded myself, and a city to explore. I turned and began to walk, my steps surer than they'd been that morning. The day was beginning to soften when I returned to my hotel. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting a honeyed glow over the cobblestones. A breeze carried the scent of roasting chestnuts and something sweet I couldn't name. I felt tired in the best way, the kind of fatigue that came from living rather than simply existing at the reception desk. Camille greeted me with her usual warm smile. "Bonsoir, Madame Marjorie. Did you enjoy your day?" I smiled, returning her kindness. "It was lovely, thank you. I think I'm starting to find my rhythm here." She nodded approvingly. "C'est merveilleux. That's the Parisian way. Slow and sweet." In the small lounge off the lobby, a few guests were scattered across armchairs, reading or chatting softly. I noticed Francois by the window, his notebook open and a glass of red wine in front of him. Something in me hesitated. I'd shared so much with him that morning, but curiosity won out. I approached, and he looked up, eyes crinkling into a smile. "Marjorie, please, join me." I settled into the chair opposite, feeling at home in his easy presence. "How was your afternoon?" he asked, closing his notebook with a quiet snap. "Wonderful," I said, honestly. "I wandered, ate too much cheese, and bought a painting. And I wrote a postcard I'm not sure I'll send." Francois leaned back, studying me with that thoughtful expression I'd come to expect. "To your son? Yes," I sighed. "I keep thinking about him, even here, about how he might never understand." He was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly. "My father was the same. He wanted me to take over the family business, a small hotel in Lyon, but I wanted to write, to travel. He called it a waste of time." We didn't speak for years. I blinked, surprised. "Did he ever come around?" Francois' smile was tinged with sadness. "Not really. He passed before we could make peace. But in the end, I think I lived the life I was meant to live. That's the thing about children, Marjorie. They don't always see the sacrifices, the small deaths we die so they can grow. Sometimes they only see the money, the inheritance, the things, not the years we gave them." His words struck deep. I'd spent decades ensuring Ethan had every chance, every opportunity I could afford. But now that I was choosing something for myself, he only saw what I was taking away. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, regret is a luxury of the safe and comfortable. I've lived. And that's worth more than any apology." I sat back, letting his words sink in. Outside, the night deepened, and the city hummed with quiet life. I realized then that my guilt, the thing that had shadowed every step since Ethan's outburst, was starting to lift. Francois poured me a small glass of wine from his carafe. "To living," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, the sound delicate and clear. "To living," I echoed, feeling a spark of defiance ignite within me. We talked until the lounge emptied, sharing small stories of our lives, the students I'd taught, the essays he'd written. I told him about the time I'd learned to drive stick shift in a borrowed car, the time I'd burnt an entire Thanksgiving turkey. He laughed, and I found myself laughing too, the kind that left tears in my eyes as I rose to leave. Francois smiled. "You've already changed, Marjorie," he said. I paused at the doorway, tilting my head. "How so?" "You walked in here with doubt. Now you walk with possibility. Don't lose that." I carried his words with me up the narrow staircase to my room, each step lighter than the one before. As I lay in bed, the hum of the city outside my window, I thought of Ethan, of Tucson, of everything I'd left behind, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Morning dawned cool and gray, the sky a soft canvas of clouds that promised either rain or a blessing of gentle light. I dressed quickly, layering a scarf around my neck, the way I'd seen Parisian women do, hoping it made me look more at ease. In this foreign city today, I would visit the Louvre. It felt like the right kind of pilgrimage, not just to see the art, but to see the world through the eyes of people who had dared to create. I took the metro for the first time, clutching the map Camille had drawn for me the night before. The train rattled and screeched through dark tunnels, emerging now and then to reveal glimpses of the city above. Graffiti-splashed walls, leafy courtyards, sun-bleached rooftops. When I stepped out at Palais Royal Musée du Louvre, I found myself at the edge of a small square where pigeons darted between the feet of tourists and locals alike. A brisk wind carried the scent of roasted chestnuts and the earthy tang of wet leaves. I followed the signs and soon stood before the iconic glass pyramid. Its sleek lines seemed to cut through the sky, the old palace behind it a testament to centuries of history. I took a deep breath, feeling small and brave all at once. Inside the museum was a labyrinth of marble and whispers. Maps unfolded like riddles in my hands, but I let my feet guide me, drawn by a mix of curiosity and a quiet determination to lose myself in this place. The corridors were crowded, tour groups clutching cameras, couples holding hands, children trailing behind parents with wide eyes. But somehow I felt cocooned in my own world, the grandeur of it all wrapping around me like a secret. I lingered in the Denon wing, drawn to the Mona Lisa, or rather, the crowd that surrounded her, arms outstretched with phones capturing her enigmatic smile through tiny screens. I waited for the crowd to thin, then stepped forward, meeting her gaze through the glass. She was smaller than I expected, her expression both amused and infinitely patient. I wondered if she knew what it felt like to hold something inside, a secret, a defiance, and to let it show only in a single unlife. Half-hidden smile, I moved on, drawn to sculptures that stood frozen in mid-motion. 2 paintings that spilled stories onto canvas with colors I'd never dared to wear. In front of Liberty, leading the people. I felt a shiver of recognition. A woman with a flag aloft, her face fierce, her posture defiant. I thought of Ethan, of his anger and confusion, of the way he'd accused me of squandering his future. I thought of Francois' words, sometimes they only see the money, the inheritance, the things not here, surrounded by centuries of human expression. I felt a clarity I hadn't known I'd needed. Life wasn't meant to be locked away in a savings account. It was meant to be painted in bold strokes, danced to street music, sipped in cafes, and shared with strangers who felt like old friends. My feet ached from the marble floors, so I found a small cafe tucked into a corner of the museum and ordered a coffee. As I sat, I pulled out my journal and began to write, the words flowing like the saying itself. Dear Ethan, today I saw Liberty leading the people, her flag high in the air. She reminded me that freedom isn't always easy. Sometimes it's choosing to live when the world expects you to sit quietly. I hope one day you understand that this journey isn't about spending your inheritance. It's about finally living mine. A tear smudged the ink. I let it dry, a small mark of humanity on the page. Outside, The sky had lightened, the clouds parting to reveal slivers of blue. I gathered my things and left the Louvre, stepping back into the pulse of the city. Montmartre would be waiting, and maybe Francois too, with his quiet wisdom and his stories. But for now, I let the city lead me, my steps lighter, my heart open. I had come to Paris to find freedom, and bit by bit, I was finding it. The sun dipped low over Montmartre, painting the rooftops in soft gold. I wandered back to my hotel, my mind still adrift in the colors and voices of the Louvre. My feet were tired, but in that satisfying way that comes from a day well spent. Though lobby was quiet, Camille's cheerful presence replaced by a night clerk who nodded politely as I passed. I reached my room, the familiar creak of the door greeting me like an old friend. Inside, the small space felt like a haven, my scarf draped over a chair. The painting I'd bought propped on the dresser, my journal open on the nightstand. I sat down my bag and was about to kick off my shoes when my phone buzzed, its screen lighting up with Ethan's name. My stomach twisted. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But then, guilt and love mingling in my chest, I swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, trying to sound steady. "Mom." His voice was flat, tired. "Where are you?" "In my hotel room." "In Paris," I replied, as if that simple statement explained everything. There was a pause, a soft sigh on the line. "Paris," he repeated. "It's been a week, Mom. I haven't heard from you. I've been worried." His words hit me like a sudden gust of wind. Had I really let so many days pass without calling? I'd sent a postcard I hadn't mailed, written letters in my journal, but no actual contact. The realization made me feel both ashamed and stubborn. "I'm sorry, Ethan," I said softly. I've been trying to be here. To really be here. It's been a long time since I did something just for myself." Another silence. "I get that, Mom. I do. But we were scared. We didn't know if something happened to you. I know I was harsh before you left, but you're still my mom." Voice wavered, and I pictured him in his kitchen. It's the same one I'd stocked with homemade meals so many times, now probably cluttered with toys and bills. "I know," I said, my throat tight. "I should have called. I needed a break from everything, from being the person everyone else expected me to be." He sighed again, a sound heavy with worry and resignation. "I guess I understand. It's just hard for me, for the kids. They keep asking when Grandma's coming back." My heart twisted. Tell them I love them, and tell them. "Tell them I'll be home soon, but not yet." "Okay," he said, the word hesitant but not angry. "When, Mom? When are you coming home?" I looked around my small room, the painting of Montmartre rooftops, the journal with my half-written thoughts, the scarf draped like a promise of tomorrow. Home, I realized, wasn't just a place anymore. It was a part of me I was still discovering. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I need a little more time." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer. "Okay, just call me, okay?" "So I know you're okay." "I will, I promised." We said goodbye, the silence between us less strained than before. I set the phone down and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Outside my window, the night deepened, the streetlights casting long shadows on the cobblestones. Paris hummed with its own quiet music, a violin in the distance, a burst of laughter from a nearby cafe. The rhythmic click of heels on pavement. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the ache of old habits and new desires tugging at me in equal measure. I had spent so many years tending to everyone else's needs, leaving my own dreams to collect dust. Now I was here, living, exploring, becoming. And maybe, just maybe, I was showing Ethan that it was okay to choose yourself. Sometimes. That choosing life didn't mean abandoning love. I picked up my journal and began to write. The ink flowing smooth and sure. "Dear Ethan, today you called." It reminded me that no matter how far I go, I'm still yours. You're still mine. I promise I'll come home, but only after I've finally met the woman I've been hiding inside for too long. I hope someday you'll understand that. Love, Mom. I closed the journal and placed it on the nightstand, feeling a small peace settle in my chest. Outside, the lights of Montmartre twinkled like promises. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like both a mother and a woman, and that both could exist together. Morning sunlight streamed through the small window, painting the room with a warm, honeyed glow. I sat on the edge of the bed, lacing up my comfortable shoes, the ones that had already carried me through my Montreux's winding streets and the halls of the Louvre. Today, I felt a pull toward the river. I'd always read about the Seine in books, a romantic thread winding through the heart of Paris, carrying centuries of history in its gentle current. It seemed fitting that after days of museums and cafes, of laughter and tears, I should finally walk its banks, letting it wash away the last traces of guilt that still clung to me. The walk from Montmartre to the river wasn't short, but every step felt purposeful. Paris revealed itself slowly, narrow alleys opening onto sunlit squares, flower stalls bursting with tulips and lavender, the smell of warm bread drifting from corner bakeries. I paused here and there to buy a small bunch of violets from a gray-haired woman, to watch a street artist sketch a couple embracing on a bench. Finally, I reached the river. The Seine flowed broad and calm beneath arched bridges, its surface catching the light like a sheet of silver. Tour boats glided by, their wakes sending ripples across the water. I found a bench near Pont Neuf and sat down, letting the breeze cool my face. Nearby, a young couple shared a quiet conversation, heads bent close together. A man in a worn brown jacket played a soft tune on his guitar, his case open for coins. Life moved around me at a gentle pace, unhurried and unburdened. I reached into my bag and pulled out my journal. The pages were filling fast fragments of thoughts, letters to Ethan, small sketches of buildings and people who'd caught my eye. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Dear Ethan, today I walked by the Seine and felt more alive than I have in years. Watched the boats, listened to the music, and let the wind carry my worries downstream. I wish you could see this place. Not just the monuments, but the way life spills onto every corner. I think I've learned that living isn't just about planning for tomorrow. It's about saying yes to today." I closed the journal and watched the water flow by, carrying leaves and twigs like small travelers on their own journeys. For a moment, I felt a deep connection to that current, to the way it moved steadily, embracing both the debris and the beauty along its path. A small cafe caught my eye. Its tables nestled beneath plane trees, the smell of strong coffee and buttery croissants wafting through the air. I ordered a café crème and a slice of tarte aux pommes, feeling decadent and free. As I ate, I noticed a man at the next table, perhaps in his early 70s, sketching in a leather-bound notebook. His hands were steady, his lines sure, and I felt a pang of envy for his quiet confidence. He caught my gaze and smiled. "Are you visiting Paris?" he asked, his English accented but clear. "Yes," I replied, smiling back. "Just trying. To find myself, I suppose?" He nodded, his eyes kind. "That's a good reason to travel. Sometimes we get so busy living for others that we forget we have a life of our own." His words felt like an echo of Francois'. And I realized how often this city reminded me of the same lesson. Again and again. I used to think I was too old for adventures, I admitted. But now I think maybe adventures are what keep us young, he chuckled. Well said. And Paris is the perfect place for adventures, don't you think? I laughed softly. I think you're right. We sat for a while, sipping our coffee in companionable silence. When I stood to leave, he wished me luck on my journey. "Bon chance, madame," he said. "And don't forget to live." As I walked back toward the hotel, the sun dipped lower, casting the city in a soft glow. My steps felt lighter, my heart more open. For the first time, I truly believed that my life wasn't over, that it was just beginning, one small step. One café crème, one stroll along the Seine at a time. I was living, and I couldn't wait to see where tomorrow might lead. The next morning dawned with a chill in the air, the kind that hinted at autumn's slow approach. I wrapped my scarf tightly around my neck as I left the hotel, the warmth of yesterday's sunlight replaced by a thin gray mist. I had no particular plan for the day, but something in me felt drawn back to the rhythms of Montmartre, the artists, the winding streets, the quiet cafes where one could lose hours in a single cup of coffee. As I climbed the hill toward Saker, see, you're the city. Below slowly revealed itself, a patchwork of rooftops. Chimneys sending wisps of smoke into the air, the Eiffel Tower in the distance, like a sentinel. Tourists posed for photos, couples leaned into each other. And vendors hawked keychains and small paintings. I found a small bench near the basilica and sat down, the stone cold beneath me. Pulling out my journal, I flipped through its pages, each one a testament to this journey, small sketches, hastily scribbled thoughts, fragments of letters to Ethan. I paused on the letter I'd started yesterday. Dear Ethan, today I walked by the Seine and felt more alive than I have in years. I watched the boats, listened to the music, and let the wind carry my worries downstream. I traced the lines with my finger. I had written so many letters in this journal, each one a lifeline back to the son I'd left behind. But none of them had made it into the post. Each time I thought of sending one, doubt crept in. Would he understand? Or would he see it as another betrayal, proof that I was spending his future on my own present? I pulled out a new sheet of paper, determined, this time to write a letter I could actually send. Dear Ethan, it's been 2 weeks since I left home, and I know that's longer than I planned. Paris has given me so much more than I expected, not just the sights and the sounds, but a chance to rediscover myself. I hope you can understand why I needed this. Spent so many years trying to be everything for everyone else, and somewhere along the way, I forgot that I'm allowed to be someone for myself, too. I paused, a pen trembling slightly. I know you're worried, and I know you're angry. I wish I could take that pain from you, but I can't. What I can do is promise that I'm coming home. Not right away, but soon. I want to come home as someone who's learned how to live fully so I can teach you. That too, that life isn't just about saving for tomorrow, but about living today. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope. My hands shook as I sealed it. I tucked it into my bag, resolving to find a postbox on my way back to the hotel. As I sat there watching the city breathe below me, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Francois standing there, his eyes warm beneath the brim of his worn hat. Writing again? He asked with a gentle smile. Yes, I said, returning his smile. This time I think I'll actually send it. He sat down beside me. Sometimes the hardest letters to send are the ones that matter most. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm scared he won't understand. Maybe he won't, Francois said softly. But maybe he will. Either way, it's a bridge between your worlds. And you'll be surprised what a bridge can carry. We sat together in silence for a while, the sounds of Montmartre washing over us, an artist humming as he painted the murmur of tourists, the distant wail of a saxophone. Finally, I stood, my resolve firm. I need to find a mailbox. I said. Francois rose too. I'll walk with you. We strolled down the hill, the letter a small weight in my bag, but my steps felt lighter. When we found a bright yellow postbox on the corner, I hesitated for only a moment. Then, with a deep breath, I slid the envelope into the slot as it disappeared. I felt something in me loosen, a thread of guilt, perhaps, or a knot of fear. Either way, I felt freer. Francois patted my shoulder. Well done, he said. I turned to him, the city stretching out behind us, and smiled. Thank you for everything. He tipped his hat, his eyes twinkling. No thanks necessary, just keep living. As we walked back toward the hotel, I felt the weight of the letter lift. I was still a mother, still responsible, but I was also a woman on a journey, one I had chosen, step by step, and maybe, just maybe, Ethan would understand. The day I left Paris was cold and bright, the sky a hard blue that made the rooftops of Montmartre glow like old copper. I stood at my hotel window for a long moment, taking in the ivy-covered facade across the street, the distant sound of a violin, and the sweet aroma of fresh croissants drifting up from the bakery below. This had become a part of me, a new rhythm, a new way of being, but it was time to go home. Packing felt different this time. Each item I folded, the scarf. From the street market, the small watercolor of the Seine. The journal, now thick with memories, carried a piece of the woman I'd become in these weeks. I zipped my suitcase with a quiet sense of pride. Downstairs, Francois was waiting in the lobby. He wore his usual hat, his eyes warm and kind. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked. I nodded, my throat tightening. "Yes, it's time." "Embrace me gently." "Then go, Marjorie. But remember, the journey doesn't end just because you go home." His words wrapped around me like a promise. I thanked him, tears threatening. The taxi ride to Charles de Gaulle felt different this time, less intimidating, more like a gentle exhale. I watched Paris unfold outside the window, the elegant bridges over the Seine, the wide boulevards, the quiet side streets. It had become a part of my story, and I knew I'd carry it with me forever. On the plane, I sat by the window, watching the city fade beneath a blanket of clouds. I thought of Ethan, of his worried voice and the tension that had lingered between us. Would he see me differently now? Would he understand why I had needed this? The flight felt endless, the hours marked by the steady hum of engines and the quiet rustle of passengers settling in for the long journey. I opened my journal one last time, its pages a tapestry of days lived on my own terms. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Dear Ethan, I'm on my way home. I don't know what you'll say when you see me, but I hope you'll see that I'm coming back stronger, braver, and more myself than I've been in years. Paris gave me more than memories. It gave me the courage to choose my own life. I hope I can show you that it's okay to choose yours too." I closed the journal and rested my head against the seat. Outside the window, dawn was breaking, painting the clouds in pinks and golds. When the plane touched down in Arizona, the dry heat rushed in like a familiar embrace. The desert sky stretched vast and cloudless, and I felt both a stranger and a native, a woman returning but never quite the same. Ethan was waiting in the arrivals hall, his arms crossed, his eyes searching. For a moment, we just looked at each other, a thousand unspoken words hanging between us. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and hugged me. "I missed you, Mom," he whispered. "I missed you too," I said, tears slipping down my cheeks. He pulled back slightly, his gaze both relieved and wary. "Are you okay?" I smiled, letting him see the woman I'd become. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm alive." He nodded, a small, uncertain smile on his lips. "Let's go home." As we walked to the car, I felt the warmth of the sun on my face, the weight of my suitcase in my hand, and the steady beat of my own heart. I had traveled the world, faced my fears, and found a part of myself I'd forgotten. And though the journey had ended, at least for now, I knew the adventure would continue in the small moments. Morning coffee, quiet conversations, the courage to keep saying yes to life, and maybe, just maybe, I'd teach Ethan that living isn't something you save up for the end. It's something you do every single day.